Please help me to reach 7,000 subscribers. It started like any other anniversary morning in Newport Heights. The sun spilled across the manicured lawns, golden light catching the edges of Bella Turner's sprawling kitchen. She hummed softly, arranging fresh white roses in a crystal vase, blissfully unaware that this morning would mark the end of her life as she knew it. 10 years of marriage, 10 years of trust, and 10 years of believing she had found forever. Henry Turner, her husband, leaned against the marble counter, scrolling through his phone. His jaw was tight, eyes flickering with attention Bella couldn't yet read. Across the room, Claire, their longtime housekeeper, moved silently, her smile too precise, too controlled. And then, as if on cue, the front door opened and in came Cynthia Jansen, socialite, fashion icon, Bella's so-called best friend. Cynthia was radiant, her crimson silk dress a bold statement for a morning that demanded nothing more than casual elegance. She kissed Bella's cheek, leaving a faint trace of lipstick, and whispered, "Happy anniversary, sweetheart." The words should have warmed Bella's heart, but the way Cynthia said them dripped with mockery. Bella, ever trusting, smiled back, oblivious to the silent conspiracy unfolding around her. In the kitchen, Claire handed Cynthia a tiny vial, no larger than a thimble. The liquid inside gleamed unnaturally in the morning light. 2 milligrams, Cynthia whispered. That's all it takes. Henry nodded, his expression unreadable. No one spoke of it aloud. That was the power of betrayal. It hid in silence, in small gestures, in the gentlest of touches. Bella carried the first course to the table herself, setting down a bowl of her favorite tomato bisque. "You three sit. I'll serve," she said with a warm laugh, oblivious that she was about to serve her own death. Henry raised his glass for a toast, his eyes never meeting hers. "To us," he said, voice steady, controlled. "To love," Bella replied, smiling, her heart full, unaware of the venom threaded through that morning. The first taste was metallic, a sharpness that made her stomach turn. She brushed it aside, forcing a laugh. "Something tastes odd," she murmured, but her hands trembled. The spoon rattled against the bowl. Henry's hand twitched. Cynthia's smirk was almost imperceptible, but it was there, her vision blurred. She clutched the table edge, trying to steady herself. "Henry, I don't feel well," she whispered, panic threading her words. "Please, help me." He stepped back. "Call an ambulance," she pleaded, voice rising, tears welling. "Henry, please." Claire feigned alarm, yet her voice betrayed no true fear. "Oh my God, what's happening?" "Henry, do something." But nothing came. Only Cynthia's whisper broke the silence. "It's working." Bella collapsed, her wineglass tipping, deep red spilling across the white tablecloth like blood. She reached for Henry's hand with the last of her strength. He turned away. By the time the ambulance arrived, neighbors had gathered, drawn by the flashing lights and hurried whispers. Cynthia cried in front of the cameras, clutching Henry's arm, playing the perfect friend. Henry gave a brief statement, measured, composed, detached. "She had a heart condition," he said. "We are devastated." Within days, Bella's life had been erased. The death certificate labeled it a tragic accident. No autopsy. Her bank accounts, her property, her dreams, and all transferred to Henry and Cynthia. Her house, the home she had built with love, now stood under their name. Friends, family, the community, all swallowed the story without question. Her funeral was a cold theater of sorrow and deceit. Neighbors whispered condolences that felt rehearsed. Cynthia and Claire wept on cue, their tears heavy with calculation. Henry accepted condolences with a stoic, almost cruel composure. Bella's mother, already frail, collapsed under the weight of grief and humiliation, her cries echoing the cruelty that had always surrounded them. And so the world moved on, believing Bella Turner was gone. But even in the silence of her so-called death, the seeds of justice and revenge had begun to take root, unseen, waiting for the day they would grow. The funeral was a study in false sorrow. Neighbors whispered softly, their eyes darting between the casket and the smiling, grieving faces of Cynthia Jansen and Claire. Their tears were meticulous, perfectly timed, a performance for anyone watching. Henry Turner stood rigid, shaking hands with acquaintances, nodding politely at sympathetic words, but his expression betrayed no true loss. Within hours, legal paperwork had moved with alarming efficiency. Haynes Group assets, Bella's savings, and her cherished Newport Heights estate were all quietly transferred to Henry and Cynthia, the spoils of their cold, calculated betrayal. Bella's mother, Margaret, could not bear it. Her knees buckled, her heart faltering under the weight of grief and shock. Family members whispered cruel remarks in the hallways, taunts about Bella's size, about making room for the new daughter-in-law. The very people she trusted seemed to circle like vultures, leaving Margaret broken and shivering in the corners of her own home. Time passed, and a year slipped quietly into the calendar. Rumors of Bella's death lingered like a dark shadow, but the community moved on. Parties, charity galas, and brunches resumed. Henry and Cynthia appeared at every social event, flaunting their newfound status, never looking back. No one suspected that Bella Turner, the woman they thought was gone, was still alive. In a secluded hospital room hundreds of miles away, Bella opened her eyes to a sterile white ceiling. Machines beeped quietly around her, a rhythmic reminder of the fragile life she still clung to. She was alive, but her body bore the scars of betrayal and attempted murder. Doctors warned her that surgery was risky without significant weight loss. Recovery would be slow, painful, and uncertain, but Bella's spirit, once broken, refused to bend completely. She looked into the mirror, eyes tracing the familiar lines of a face she thought she had lost forever. The grief, the betrayal, the theft of her life. It ignited a fire within her. She vowed silently but with unwavering conviction that she would return. She would not just survive. She would reclaim everything they had stolen and make them pay. Months of preparation followed, each day blending pain with purpose. Nutritionists and surgeons became her allies, trainers and therapists her guides. Bella endured the sharp sting of needles, the cold sterility of hospital corridors, the exhaustion of physical conditioning. Every moment of suffering was a step toward transformation. She imagined herself reborn, a version of herself that no one would recognize but that would carry the weight of justice and vengeance. Plastic surgery, vocal training, posture correction, these became the tools of her rebirth. Bella chose a new identity with meticulous care. Each decision calculated to shield her from recognition, while granting her the power to infiltrate the very world that had betrayed her. She imagined herself walking into the high society events where Henry and Cynthia thrived, not as a victim but as a force they could never anticipate. Through the long nights, she carried the memory of her lost child, the ruin of her mother, and the theft of her dignity. These memories were no longer just wounds, they were fuel. Fuel for transformation, for strategy, and for the eventual reckoning. Pain became a language she learned fluently. Endurance became her closest companion. And when the first morning sunlight touched her face after months of preparation, she stood taller, eyes sharper, mind clearer. She whispered to herself, a mantra born of suffering and determination, "I will come back and they will pay." Every step she took from that room was a step toward vengeance. Every calculated choice, every act of patience was a brick in the path to reclaiming the life stolen from her. Bella Turner, as the world knew her, was gone. In her place, something new was emerging, something beautiful, dangerous, and unstoppable. The world outside continued its shallow rhythms, unaware that a storm was quietly gathering, patient and relentless. The first chapter of her revenge had begun in silence, but it would not end quietly. Bella's transformation was nothing short of extraordinary, but it was neither easy nor painless. In the quiet seclusion of a coastal recovery clinic in Seabreeze, Bella endured grueling surgeries, each one chiseling away the remnants of the woman she had been, sculpting her into someone unrecognizable yet profoundly powerful. Her nose was refined, her jawline sharpened, her body slender and strong. Her voice, once soft and warm, was carefully retrained to convey confidence, authority, and subtle allure. Pain was constant, yet every ache was a reminder. She was rising from the ashes of betrayal. Weeks of recovery bled into months. Bella immersed herself in painting, a passion she had once abandoned under the weight of ridicule and humiliation. The canvas became both shield and sword, a place to hide her identity and a weapon to tell the world that she had returned. Her hands, once clumsy with grief, learned precision and power with each brushstroke. Reds burned across the canvas, vibrant and provocative, a silent homage to the blood she had spilled in spirit, the fury she had bottled inside. Art became therapy, obsession and disguise all at once. When the final stages of her transformation were complete, Bella Turner ceased to exist. In her place stood Nova Chase, a name that resonated with mystery, strength, and independence. Legal papers were signed. Passports and identification were changed. Nova secured a modest yet elegant studio in downtown Seabreeze, the salty ocean air brushing against large windows, the perfect cover for her next moves. Nova's persona was magnetic, yet enigmatic. She walked through cafes, galleries, and streets with an ease that masked the storm brewing beneath her composed exterior. She learned the language of high society, the subtle gestures, the faint inflections, the way a smile could disarm or unsettle. Every encounter became a rehearsal, every interaction a test. She was not merely surviving. She was preparing to strike. The red in her paintings carried meaning beyond the aesthetic. Each stroke, each hue whispered stories of loss, betrayal, and the promise of retribution. Patrons and casual observers admired her talent, unaware that the art itself was a prelude, a warning in color to those who had wronged her. Nova Chase was more than a disguise. She was a symbol of what Bella Turner had endured and what she had become. She trained herself beyond art. Subtle exercises in self-defense, etiquette, and social manipulation rounded her into a complete force. Every smile could disarm. Every conversation could reveal weakness in others while concealing her own. And as the months passed, Nova's resolve hardened. She would return to the world that had abandoned and betrayed her, not as the victim they expected, but as an unstoppable force of calculated justice. Yet even in her rebirth, the pain of loss lingered. Memories of her child, the devastation of her mother, and the betrayal of those she had loved were never far from her mind. They fueled her, sharpened her focus, and reminded her of the stakes. Nova Chase was not merely Bella reborn. She was Bella perfected, an instrument honed to deliver truth, reckoning, and the reclaiming of everything stolen. Nova spent her days painting, but her nights were filled with planning. She observed Henry Turner's public appearances, Cynthia Jansen's social maneuvers, and the intricate web of connections that had allowed them to thrive after her supposed death. Each detail was stored, analyzed, and catalogued. She learned their patterns, their weaknesses, the cracks in their carefully constructed lives. And when Nova finally stepped onto the streets of Seabreeze as a free woman, she carried the weight of her past like a silent weapon. She was beautiful, confident, and untouchable, but underneath she was driven by a singular burning purpose: to expose the Turner-Jansen crimes and reclaim everything they had taken. Every brushstroke, every step into the world, every carefully calculated smile was a part of the grand design. The world would see Nova Chase, the captivating artist rising in Seabreeze's art scene. But Henry and Cynthia, when the time came, would recognize the truth in her eyes before anyone else. The woman they had destroyed had returned, and she would not rest until justice was not only done, but unavoidable. The charity art auction at the Haynes Group's downtown Seabreeze gallery was buzzing with the usual blend of wealth, influence, and carefully curated smiles. Nova Chase walked through the grand entrance, her presence magnetic but calculated, every step deliberate, every glance measured. No one recognized her, not the patrons, not the socialites, and most importantly, not Henry Turner or Cynthia Jansen, who were seated near the center, flaunting their status with practiced ease. Her painting, The Red Tempest, was displayed prominently, a bold splash of crimson that seemed to pulse with life. Nova had whispered in advance to a select few. Anyone who guessed the inspiration behind the pigment would earn a private dinner. Whispers rippled through the crowd, curiosity mixed with admiration. Henry leaned forward, pride swelling at the acclaim, while Cynthia's smug smile betrayed her overconfidence. Nova moved subtly through the gallery, stopping briefly near Henry. Their eyes met just for a heartbeat, but that glance carried an unspoken recognition, a shock that flickered across his face before he masked it. She smiled politely, her expression neutral, yet the familiarity in her eyes was enough to unsettle him. Cynthia, catching the flicker, tilted her head, confusion creeping into her smug demeanor. As the evening progressed, Nova's painting became the centerpiece of conversation. She allowed subtle hints to slip in, a comment about the pigment containing traces of blood, enough to make the crowd murmur, scandalized. Henry's pride wavered. Whispers of impropriety began to circulate. Socialites leaned closer, cameras flashed, and murmurs of intrigue and horror spread across the room. Throughout the event, Nova maintained her composure, mingling with elegance, answering questions with poise, never revealing more than necessary. Her plan was not confrontation tonight. It was planting the seeds of doubt and fear. By the time the auction ended, the Turners' carefully maintained social dominance had begun to fracture, and Nova disappeared into the night, leaving only the lingering impression of a mysterious, unforgettable woman. The storm had begun, and they had no idea it was already inside the walls of their world. Henry and Cynthia's initial confidence crumbled quickly, replaced by fury and panic. They retaliated publicly, determined to unmask Nova as an opportunist and restore their dominance. Rumors spread through social circles, questioning her talent and motives. At a private gala, Henry attempted to intimidate her, a shove that rattled her balance, a sharp slap intended to wound more than the skin. Nova endured silently, her calm exterior never betraying the storm of strategy within. Every insult, every threat became a tool she carefully catalogued for future leverage. Beyond the chaos, Nova began forging alliances. She befriended a sympathetic security guard who understood the inner workings of high-profile events. A seasoned art patron named Mr. John, whose influence stretched through Seabreeze's gallery scene, and Lily, a young, idealistic assistant drawn to Nova's enigmatic presence. Each connection was nurtured, each alliance a calculated step toward dismantling the Turner-Jansen empire. Trust was built, carefully measured, and later transformed into instruments of exposure. Meanwhile, Nova orchestrated her first subtle public blow. A carefully leaked photograph suggested Henry's infidelity and financial mismanagement. The media picked it up, stockholders panicked, and Haynes Group shares plummeted. Investors demanded answers. Cynthia's public composure faltered as whispers of scandal grew louder. Their meticulously curated image began to crack, and with every stumble, Nova's presence, still unseen in origin, loomed larger over their lives. Even as her revenge progressed, Nova faced moments of moral doubt. She remembered the warmth of her lost child, the heartbreak of her mother's collapse, and the innocence she had once cherished. In quiet moments, she questioned whether vengeance was turning her into the very cruelty she despised. Those reflections reminded her purpose was justice, not blind retribution. Her schemes were designed not to destroy for pleasure, but to restore the balance stolen from her life. Through calculated strategy, discreet sabotage, and strategic relationships, Nova's campaign gained momentum. Henry and Cynthia's retaliation only tightened the noose she had quietly woven around them. And as the city whispered about the mysterious artist who seemed always one step ahead, Nova's resolve hardened. This was only the beginning, and every move she made was leading them closer to the reckoning they could not escape. Nova's investigation became meticulous, almost surgical in precision. With Lily at her side and a discreet whistleblower providing inside information, she assembled irrefutable evidence, financial documents proving embezzlement, a recorded confession from Claire outlining the murder plot, and detailed notes linking Cynthia and Henry to every act of betrayal. Each piece was catalogued, verified, and stored securely, a growing arsenal of truth that could no longer be ignored. When the evidence was finally ready, Nova orchestrated its public release with flawless timing. Media outlets buzzed with shocking revelations. Haynes Group faced criminal investigations, and the social world that had once elevated Cynthia and Henry began to crumble. High society events were canceled, sponsorships withdrawn, and friends and colleagues quietly distanced themselves. The empire they had built on deceit was unraveling before their eyes. Cynthia lashed out with desperation, hurling accusations and threats at anyone who would listen. Henry attempted damage control, making public statements and staged appearances, but every move only exposed more cracks in their carefully constructed facade. Family secrets long buried surfaced for all to see. The murder plot, the cover-up of a pregnancy, and decades of manipulation and greed. Nova watched, restrained yet triumphant, allowing the law and truth to take their course. Amid the chaos, Nova sought emotional closure. She visited her mother in a private care facility, her heart heavy with memory and grief. In a quiet room, she opened a letter from the past, written by her mother during her darkest hours, and read it aloud. Tears fell, but they carried relief as well as sorrow. The first layers of her trauma were finally beginning to lift. Nova understood that truth alone would not complete her journey. Justice was necessary, but it needed to be precise, controlled, and public. As her mother's voice echoed in her memory, Nova's determination deepened. The foundation for the final act of her reckoning was laid: evidence, strategy, and the unwavering commitment to see Henry and Cynthia face the consequences of their actions. The storm that had begun quietly in Seabreeze was now visible to the world. Lies, manipulation, and betrayal had no shelter, and every document, recording, and note Nova had gathered became a weapon of accountability. Her transformation was not just physical. It was a complete reclaiming of power, intellect, and moral authority. The countdown to confrontation had begun, and the world would watch as the empire built on cruelty began its final collapse. The courtroom was charged with tension, the air thick with anticipation. Every seat was filled. Journalists, high society observers, and those who had once admired the Turners now whispered behind polite hands. Nova Chase entered quietly, exuding calm authority. She carried with her the culmination of months of planning, the irrefutable proof of betrayal, manipulation, and murder that would finally force Henry and Cynthia to confront the consequences of their actions. As the proceedings began, evidence was presented systematically: financial records, recorded confessions, and Claire's meticulously kept notes. The room reacted with shock and murmurs as each revelation unfolded. Cynthia's face, once composed and commanding, twisted in disbelief and fear. Henry shifted uncomfortably in his chair, sweat forming at his temple as the magnitude of exposure pressed down upon him. Nova spoke last, her voice steady, compelling, a blade hidden in calmness. She revealed the final piece, a recording that captured their plot in their own words. Cynthia's veneer cracked. She shouted, hysterical, lashing out at anyone near. Henry attempted a desperate act, a sudden charge toward the defense table, but security intercepted him, holding him back as gasps rippled through the courtroom. Then, Nova turned to Henry, eyes locking with his. In a measured, calm tone, she recounted the cruelty he had inflicted, the lies, the betrayal, the stolen life. She showed him a photograph of the child he had abandoned, the reminder of the humanity he had discarded. Henry's posture crumpled. The weight of guilt and realization left him broken. He understood in that moment that his power had been stripped away, that the carefully constructed world he dominated had collapsed. She did not strike him, did not seek vengeance in violence. Instead, Nova declared her purpose: justice, not blood. The court proceedings continued, and Cynthia was taken into custody, Henry facing charges, while their allies and enablers distanced themselves or were implicated. When the gavel finally fell, the courtroom exhaled. Nova emerged as the survivor, the one who had been underestimated, the one who had quietly reclaimed her power. Her journey through grief, betrayal, and rebirth had reached its turning point. The empire built on deceit had fallen, and the world had witnessed the rise of a woman who would not be silenced, who would not bow, and who had reclaimed her life with precision and dignity. The sentencing brought a quiet satisfaction. Haynes' group was restructured under strict oversight, and both Cynthia and Henry faced the consequences of their actions. Nova Chase ensured that her mother's care was secured and established a foundation dedicated to survivors of betrayal and domestic cruelty. Through art classes, mentorship programs, and community outreach, she created spaces where victims could heal, find their voice, and reclaim their lives. Montages of healing played quietly in her mind and in the studio, children laughing as they painted under her guidance, her mother smiling for the first time in years, the empty halls of the old Turner estate slowly being repurposed as a community center. Even minor characters who had once contributed to her suffering faced consequences or sought redemption. Some begged forgiveness, others quietly disappeared. Nova chose mercy where it mattered but never wavered in her resolve to protect the innocent and punish the guilty. On a serene afternoon, Nova stood on the cliffside property overlooking the ocean. Waves crashed against rocks below, the horizon stretching infinitely before her. In that moment, she reflected on the cost of survival, the pain of loss, and the triumph of reclaiming a life that had been stolen. Every scar, every betrayal, every moment of fear had shaped her into the woman standing there, powerful, unyielding, and ready for what lay ahead. She turned back to the studio, where paintings still awaited exhibition, and whispered a promise to herself. The fight was never truly over. Life would continue to test her, but she now understood the strength she carried. Nova had not only survived, she had transformed, and through that transformation, she had the power to inspire, protect, and change lives. To those watching her story, she offered a simple, heartfelt plea: share your experiences, reflect on the injustices you've witnessed, and remember that strength often arises from the deepest pain. Comment below. What would you do if someone tried to steal everything from you? Your voice matters, and your story could inspire others. And if this journey of survival and rebirth moved you, hit subscribe and turn on notifications to follow more stories of courage, empowerment, and justice. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Nova's silhouette remained against the fiery sky, a testament to resilience, justice, and the enduring power of reclaiming one's life. Somewhere in the distance, the first hints of her next challenge whispered on the wind, a reminder that a survivor's purpose never truly ends.